If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Lore by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, I shall be reviewing the LA by Night web series, an official World of Darkness actual play. I shall also reflect upon my experience with the characters and accessibility as a whole. As of the composition of this script, the 1st of November 2021, Season 5 of LA by Night is just finished, shutting the doors on the 3-year-old web series / actual play. If you don't know what I'm talking about, LA by Night is one of those many World of Darkness actual plays that all the kids in the community are into these days. If you don't know what an actual play is, it's essentially what happens if you film yourself playing and running your tabletop role-playing game session and uploading it onto the internet. Larger ones, such as Critical Role and tonight's topic of conversation, LA by Night, are known as web series, which are very similar to TV shows but lack the usual heavy production costs. A web series requires a camera, an idea for a show, and people to recite the script or, in the case of actual plays, unscripted lines. It just so happens that LA by Night and Critical Role have famous voice actors and folks prominent in the tabletop role-playing game industry and community. In short, LA by Night is our Critical Role. Or perhaps I should say was. As I said a moment ago, LA by Night is finished, and we're moving on to New York by Night, as teased by Jason Cole, the storyteller for LA by Night and brand marketing manager at World of Darkness HQ in Stockholm. This new location makes sense, given the most recent video games, Shadows and Coteries of New York, take place in the Big Apple. That actual play may have even started by the time this episode has gone live, but returning back to Los Angeles, this actual play has a huge place in the barely beating hearts of the family, the name dubbed for the VTM community online, as penned by Erika Ishii, actress and one of the players in LA by Night. I have peppered my thoughts regarding certain episodes and characters on social media throughout the duration of the show's existence, but now the show is in torpor, so to speak, I think now is the perfect time to talk about the show as a whole and see whether it is worth watching for fans old and new alike. But before we dive into the show review proper, here are the rules. I will not be dissecting each season and exploring individual episodes. This is an overviewing look at the web series. I will look as to how it is presented and easily it is conveyed to new and old players alike. As this is a review written and presented by me, all thoughts and opinions are my own, so if you disagree with something I have said, that is totally fine. It does not mean that you're right and I'm wrong and vice versa. I will also mention that there will be spoilers throughout, but I will try and avoid anything that are considered pivotal plot moments. So if that sort of thing bothers you, tough titty. So what does LA by Night entail other than the bleeding obvious, pun intended? LA by Night is a VTM chronicle set in the city of the same name, using the Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition rule set, published originally by Modifius Entertainment, now Renegade Game Studios. It also uses the La Sombra mechanics of Chicago by Night by Onyx Path Publishing, and an extensive amount of homebrew, pulling in rituals and thaumaturgy paths from old editions for various Tremere NPCs. I also feel that it references some material from Wraith the Oblivion beyond the usage of ghosts. I have also seen some discussion online that some obscure Mage the Ascension tidbits are included as well, but I am not prepared to entertain such notion, for I know next to nothing about Mage as of the writing of this script. If such inclusions are indeed what I suspect them to be, I like that, as I'm always in favour of Easter eggs, especially the clever ones. Fans of the deep lore of VTM will get lovely interpretations of the traditions, the beginnings of the first Anarch Revolution from the perspective of a Sabbat turned Camarilla La Sombra Scourge, and much, much more. I will say that those that are brand new to V5 and want to learn about the La Sombra and their relationship with the Camarilla and Anarchs can find a great crash course scattered throughout the first 2 of the 5 seasons. This level of world building and sprinkling of lore does spread pretty thin as we reach the latter half of the 3rd season, but I will get onto more of that in a bit. The show focuses around 4 kindred of varying clans, ages, genders and generations that all belong to a coterie of an Anarch sect, which is the ruling faction within LA, keeping to the established lore. Alexander Ward plays Jasper of Clan Nosferatu, an enigmatic and mostly secretive sewer rat. I have mentioned this character often enough as the source of how I fell in love with the Nosferatu, cementing them as my favourite clan. Alexander Ward being an actor specialising in portraying monsters, creatures and inhumane things really brings to life the stalking, skulking nature of the stealthy clan. Jasper's character being one for collecting knowledge and keeper of a many secret to an extent is something that I feel really resonated with me for reasons I have waffled about in great detail before. Besides that, I love his character, terribly flawed but arguably one of the more grounded of the cast, minus one element of his feeding practices which you can learn about yourself by watching the show. Cynthia Marie plays a Toreador fashion designer by the name of Nellie G, whose backstory is the most tragic and engaging out of all the player characters in my opinion. A tragic tale of an emotionally abusive sire, Chaz, who was brilliantly played by Mark Meir, who you may know as Max the Nosferatu in Stitch of Fate and Commander Shepard in the Mass Effect games amongst other things of course. She, Nellie G, has an interesting familial past regarding ancestors, which is where those Wraith and potential mage references I mentioned come in. She probably has the most development of the coterie of anarchs that fight against each other and the Camarilla, but her development just halts suddenly and she does not have a great deal going on by the time she becomes Baron of Hollywood. After Chaz, my favourite character of the show is Victor Temple of Clan Ventrue, which should probably concern long-time listeners who know my stance on the Ventrue, but hear me out. Victor is a hip-hop label and club owner who upholds the Masquerade by hiding in plain sight. That said, he does constantly break the masquerade of his live streams and the decor of his club. He brings some much-needed humour at times and is often the voice of reason when emotional tensions are high, only losing his cool when he kinda frenzies in the first episode of the show and later in the same season when he has to fulfill his clan compulsion. He is far more relatable to most Ventrues in VTM material, and a lot of people who claim Ventrues are their favourite clans too, to be honest. He is also the character that has the least developed in terms of character, and the show left many things regarding him and his relationships with certain Camarilla figures unanswered. The last of the main coterie is the Bruja Annabel, who is played by the talented Erika Ishii, who I believe is the newest to the World of Darkness brand within the troupe, both in and out of character, but I am more than willing to be proven wrong here. Annabel was embraced by Carver, who is played by Telsian Jaffe, and is trying to work everything out whilst the Anarch Free States goes to total gorilla shit. She is definitely the kindred most connected to her humanity, given she is barely a fledgling. It is really through her where a lot of the humanity of VTM shines through during this actual play, as she struggles to not give in to the temptations of her beast despite the fact she is probably the most frequent user of her disciplines, and tries to desperately keep her romantic partners out of the world of darkness. Terribly, might I add, as both become either a vampire or ghoul by the end, both by her reckoning might I add, but that is really the sadness of VTM in a nutshell for you. This is a perfectly fine character concept, especially for what I can only assume is a first-time / inexperienced player in the world of darkness. However, this is about as much as I can tolerate, as I personally loathe the concept for reasons I explained in a previous episode where I ranked the VTM clans from worst to best. She, alongside another character in the show, is incredibly hypocritical about the usage of disciplines and shunning those for killing others. Annabel does kill one person in the show, towards the end of the final series, but it was something I felt was overly dramatic and rather avoidable. Besides her emotional flings with the other mortal touchstones, there is not a great deal of development in her character, and her stubborn determination to shun the concept of her vampirism has caused much disdain amongst the community. Whilst not a member of their coterie, the Malkavian X, played by Xander Genere, makes many an appearance across the show and, like most Malkavians, is something of a mixed bag. He is an interesting character with a lot going on, leaning into the ye old Seer concept they were once known for, the concept that V5 is trying to push towards. X, however, is far kookier in presentation, at least in the beginning, edging dangerously close to Fishmouth at times. That said, I do find him an engaging character on the whole, especially as the show goes on and it touches upon something I don't see enough of, which is the effect the Curse of Malkav has on the members of the Clan of the Moon, how they struggle with such a barrage of thoughts, all the answers but none of the questions, how it could, by some definition of the word, lead one to utter insanity. This is something that is pulled off rather effectively during a later season, the fourth one I think. I also have to mention fan favourite ever of Clan Tremere, who pops up in the coterie with increased frequency as the show progresses. She is an interesting character to dissect. She began as an NPC by Jason Carl, before shortly becoming a player character portrayed by Josephine McAdams, both portrayals being reserved personalities, hinting at a possible romantic interest for Jasper. Elusive and mysterious, she was something of an enigma to say the least. That doesn't last very long as she becomes quite a pivotal character to the grander plot plot as she tampers with ley lines in a weird labyrinth that Jasper calls his domain, takes on powerful Lasombra with homebrewed Path of the 11-Bolt powers, and becomes emotionally entangled with her lover and her side Katia, played by Shane Easton, who Jasper becomes especially jealous of as they try and deal with
Strauss, Maximilian Strauss,
who's one of the few characters in the video game Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines that makes an appearance in LA by Night. She becomes far more emotional as a result, as she deals with what she claims to be her first kill, which I find a little hard to believe. Her hatred for Strauss makes her short-sighted in some of her decision-making also. It is also interesting seeing her character develop as her past and emotional trauma, for lack of a better phrase, is shoved right at her all of a sudden, forcing her to take action about that, on top of the mess she is dragged into with the regular coterie. However, to say that her character develops emotionally is not me saying that is a good thing, at least not here. If anything, she becomes far more immature and hostile as the show goes on, which is certainly understandable, as the beast within turns everything up to 11.5. It just doesn't make sense to me that it would surprise her that she fucking barbecued someone when she fires lightning bolts at her opponents. Her actions and emotions become increasingly confusing and pitiful throughout the latter parts of the series, to such a point where I find myself catching my jaw as I hit the floor out of pure dumbfoundedness. I thought Eva was always meant to be a bit more detached and not as humane as the rest of the cast, but I guess we will never know now, will we? Even if you haven't watched the show, you would know of the Jasper Evership, which is occasionally known as Jeva, which is what happens when you literally slap the two names together. You would know that their relationship is a very complicated one, as is anything concerning the emotional well-being of vampires. I can remember when it was first properly revealed that I was very curious how it would pan out, and, well, to be totally honest, I would end up hating everything about it, and I am dreadfully concerned about the mental stability of the community that view this as a healthy relationship to aspire to. I'm sorry, but Eva becomes a very abusive partner in the latter part of the show, which to me is something of a red flag and quite the fucking turn off. She is very demanding that no one must use disciplines on her to control her, even when her life and the life of her allies are in danger, often caused by her recklessness, brash stupidity, and it is more than willing to exercise her powers on Jasper on more than one occasion to keep him in line when he's trying to save his coterie. Granted, Jasper would probably be dead if she hadn't interfered, but for heaven's sake, woman, have some fucking consistency with your bullshit. It is a horrible, toxic and manipulative relationship, even for kindred standards. I will probably get crucified by the community for thinking that, but I honestly don't care. I suppose the only good I can pull from this is knowing that it all took its toll on Eva, resulting in what I think is a very appropriate and very mopey, edgy ending. Look, I know we have all had our fair share of abusive relationships, but this is not peak power couple here. You could do better than wanting this. Jasper deserves better, and I wish him all the fucking best. As much of the show, and indeed this review as a whole, is revolved around the plight of the cast, what is the driving plot behind said emotions? As mentioned earlier, they are an Anarch coterie standing their ground in the Anarch Free States who, for the most part, are trying to expand their own territories. You probably know that Victor and Nellie G become the Barons of the Valley and Hollywood respectively, and that Annabelle is thrust into the role of leadership for some Anarchs to be part of a revolution that doesn't even fucking happen. You probably know that Matthew Mercer of Critical Role, amongst other things, reprises his role of Beckett, but I will touch on that later on. There is a lot to dissect here, and it would be pointlessly silly of me to go through all the episodes of all 5 seasons, as it would devoid any reason for you watching it if I spoil everything. That, and I am not prepared to rewatch it all for the purpose of this review. I won't lie, I don't want to. I have better things to be doing with my time, like making cool new shit for the horny bastards that make up my community. With that in mind, I will do my best to present the show as a whole. Seasons 1, 2 and 3 aired on the Geek and Sundry YouTube channels, and VODs are available on their website and Twitch, I believe. Seasons 1 and 2, including the epilogues and the WonderCon live show, are available as a podcast. Seasons 4 and 5 can be found on the World of Darkness Twitch and YouTube channels. Seasons 1 and 2 are kind of a blur in my mind, which is by no means a bad thing. They are just simply the oldest, and I binged watched them late 2019, and anything pre-2020 feels like a millennia ago. They were both very good, engaging seasons when the production was far more casual and laid back, and wasn't trying to emulate a web series too much. Again, this isn't a criticism, just a change in style that is neither better nor worse objectively speaking. I feel these 2 seasons feel more anarch in ethos, for some violent conflict would happen in each episode that would drive the plot forward. It was very exciting getting into each episode thinking what mess they are going to get into and how and if they are going to survive. Season 3 is probably when World of Darkness HQ went, "Hey,
Hey folks, come on over and have a look at this. You see that? Look how fucking great those numbers are. Folks really like this fucking shit. How about we just up the production a little bit, just give it a bit more fucking money. Let's make it look a bit nicer, yeah? Yeah, let's go and up the production a little bit.
More lighting was added, the music and general vibe got more moody, and special effects started to appear, most notably the cast fading out of existence when they used Obfuscate. A little corny, but I liked it all the same. It is also in Season 3 where I started to become a little annoyed with the show, as the pace just slowed to a horrible slog as an uneasy truce between the Anarchs and Cam is called, the latter probably making themselves known in the city. Despite a brilliant memoriam interlude with the cast and guest stars Brian Deckard and Amelia Blair Rose of Detroit Become Human fame, they play as Prince Vannevar Thomas of Clan Ventrue and Seneschal Suzanne Rochelle of Clan Toreador respectively. They appear a few times in the show, even having their own episodes, and are some of my personal highlights in the whole show. Brian especially portrays the conflicting personalities of Prince Vannevar perfectly. When Season 4 rolled by, we are probably in the COVID time, so the format changed from live to pre-recorded. This might have been the case with parts of Season 3, but I honestly cannot remember. Season 4 also had a new location to record their games, which I found a little disappointing, as it just looked a bit boring in comparison to the old set. Season 4 is also my least favourite season, as the aforementioned truces stagnate any plot development as everyone just bickers and squabbles amongst each other. Nothing happened, and was just frustrating to watch. It felt more like LA by Night during the second half of the season, mainly because of a large conflict between the coterie and some vampires, in addition to X reaching an emotional breaking point. That said, it did not do much to give me confidence for what would follow. I remember telling some friends within the community that if the first 2 to 3 episodes of Season 5 didn't return to what I'm dramatically calling the glory nights of LA by Night, I'd stop watching it altogether, which was upsetting for me as I'd really come to grow and love the show and cast. Mostly. Then Season 5 rolls on by and you're thrown straight into the action as 4 seasons hinting the SI's takeover finally happens, with the coterie members being hit by various squads across the city. The drama was intense throughout the first half, the stakes were on the line, and I'm almost annoyed that none of them died, given how severely outnumbered the vampires were. Brennan Lee Mulligan as a Society of Leopold member was just outstanding throughout his brief time on the show. I'm unsure whether he was knowledgeable on the Lord prior to the show, but he certainly pulled it off with so much passion. That said, it is quite easy to sound like you know a lot about the Society of Leopold when you throw out God, Jesus and mention their holy light enough times. But Season 5, having gone off the booze for a short while, goes back to the familiar slow drag and nothing fucking happens. 2 to 3 episodes of recap and talking things through with the coterie where this could have been squashed into one large episode, surely. Then there was the criminally wasted opportunity that was Matthew Mercer's reprise. It was Beckett, during a 3-hour episode. 3 whole hours. Beckett is in 20 minutes of it. You heard right, 20 minutes of it as part of the second and last recap episode. Oh, how I hate how much World of Darkness pushed his appearance as part of the episode he was in, given how the appearance of Beckett does absolutely nothing to advance the plot. His first appearance as Beckett, which you can find on Vancouver by Night's YouTube channel, is a much better used opportunity in my totally biased opinion. Very shady marketing of you, World of Darkness, for shame on you! But hostile frustrations aside, it is after this encounter that things begin to wrap up as the coterie deal with the SI once and for all before facing one final episode, which is basically many epilogues just smashed together, providing different endings for the cast, some having better conclusions than others, and ever still being fucking weird. After it all finished, I sat there, on my sofa feeling rather solemn. Despite my overly negative attitude in this review, this show has been really important to me. My love for tabletop role-playing games and the deep and beautifully hopeful World of Darkness comes from LA by Night. My love for the Nosferatu comes from Jasper Hartwood. I learned and became obsessed with the powers of obtenebration through the show, becoming fascinated with the La Sombra also. I discovered the talented Ivan von Norman and Satine Phoenix amongst others, and the cool things they do at their respective companies. I made friends, relationships, and a whole heap of wonderful memories through and from it, and I'm genuinely sad to see it go. I'm also terribly excited for what Chronicles comes next. Sentimental bullshit aside, LA by Night is without a shadow of a doubt a good, entertaining web series filled with a wonderfully talented cast and fantastic storyteller who together creates a truly unique take on the world of darkness. It is by no means perfect and has a tendency to indulge a bit too much in its own moody Twilight-esque aesthetic and is not ideal for the first-time player, but there are a few finer examples of how to bring humanity into the world of darkness through the jaded lens of Vampire the Masquerade. Just don't go thinking the Anarchs are the good guys, the heroes. They really aren't. And for those of you who are new to the Lore by Night brand and the reviews I occasionally do, I do not do out of 10 scores because they are subjectively pointless. One person's 10 out of 10 is another's 3 out of 5 stars, which is another's minus 42 out of 100. So I shall rate this web series fill in with gold out of 10, as that is just as helpful as a proper out of 10 score. To be kept updated, follow the Lore by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.